this wonderful helmet off. It's going to be a little tricky. And just a little intro about you and the company.
Me first?
Absolutely.
All right. SmartPress is an employee-owned premium commercial printer. We feel we have optimized the customer experience through online print ordering. We do that through 3 pillars, one being world-class customer service, the highest quality with the individual fleet of presses that we have, and environmental sustainability.
Awesome. Chris?
All right, hello everybody, I'm Chris from Corefact. We are a marketing company. We do a lot of print, primarily direct mail, commercial print, work with PSPs, B2B, B2C, so on. Based in California and Louisville, Kentucky. Woo!
Charlie Alexander here, Alexander's Print Advantage. We're a short run print manufacturer where all we do is the book of one basically. So we do a lot of photo books, print sets, wedding invites, and things like that.
Yeah, I talked about this earlier. You kind of downplay that. Oh, we just do a few books. How many books we talking? How many things?
So we do typically between 10,000 and 30,000 individual orders per day.
It's not bad. Yeah. All right. So, how does automation help that out?
Yeah, so our workflow is completely automated. We ingest files in a completely automated fashion. Everything's 100% API driven.
And what drove that? We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we were always interested in merging print and technology. 10 years ago, we decided to make that switch to go completely automated. Once COVID hit, it kind of slowed down or stopped commercial. So at that point, this side of the business really took off and we just never went and got commercial back.
Chris?
Well, I would say, automation is somewhat in our DNA. We started as a software company. And early on we got into print and we really embraced it and have been building that and, automating both the digital print side, but everything from the marketing side, customer acquisition, things like that. So automation effectively runs across the entire gamut of our company.
Yeah, for us, a proprietary web-to-print solution, ingestion of files, processing of proofs, pulling jobs to press, automatic impositions, reducing the amount of time that we're not doing, adding value added time that we are. Automation is key.
Oh, when we had a quick Zoom, you talked about some of the placement, finding things in your shop. I was kind of blown away at some of that. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're ticketless, so we're entirely digital. So there's barcodes, we call it a PT sheet that runs on top of the job. Kind of gives us a die line, an overall view, and a routing tag, so it tells us where this job has to process through the shop. As that job journeys through the shop, it's scanned in locations throughout that process. So at any time, we can find one of the 600 to 700 orders that are in the shop. And that allows us to be able to real-time data, know exactly where we are, how close we are to the float time when the job has to ship. It's integral into our business. And we hope that eventually this will also tie into robots, right, that we were talking about earlier, and how we can move that product around the shop without having folks have to move it, right?
Robots? He looked at you.
We have a robot. Yep.
Tell me more.
So it's automation is an evolution, right? You incrementally get better and better, and then eventually you look at inefficiencies in the system. And for us, we were moving lots of jobs between the press and the different stations in the bindery. And what we found is the press operators were walking jobs over, and we don't want that. We want the press operators running the press 24 hours a day, right? So every time they stepped away, either there's a quality issue or the press stops, runs out of paper. We don't want that. So we have a simple cart robot, and you press a button that says, okay, go to book cutting, go to lamination, go to shipping. And the beautiful thing about the robot is it shows up every day, all day. Its only meal break is we change the battery, and then it's good for another 8 hours. And It hasn't complained once. It's awesome. And it was dirt cheap. This robot, if you think about robotics, the price is coming down, just like technology and everything else. This robot was $15,000. And I calculated 66 trips per day that it's eliminated. And that's just the beginning, right? So eventually we're looking at robotics across different parts of the plant.
Now, as you're doing those calculations, obviously there's a bigger plan.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
With automation? Yeah. So if I had to choose, I would start really with customer acquisition. It's not what this audience, we talk a lot about print here, but really for us, marketing automation, building your book of business, right? Because if you don't have the orders, it doesn't matter how many presses you have. So really focusing on your sales and marketing side. Then when you get into print, you can decide you can start at the beginning or the end. And when I say the beginning, it's order ingestion, right? How do I get the orders in? How do I standardize those orders? Create job list tickets and or ticketless jobs and things like that. And then as you evolve and you walk down the path, eventually you start wanting to automate finishing, right? Because finishing, believe it or not, your binder is probably where most of your labor is. And that's where most of the mistakes come into creating reprints or inefficient use of resources. And so I think that's the ultimate holy grail, is when you go end to end, customer acquisition to order submission to finishing, and then even things like shipping and returns, right? So make it really easy for the customer to interface with your customer service so that they don't have to spend time on the phones. So automation is something, when you think high level, it's through your entire business. And ultimately it's a journey and it's iterative, right? You start on day one with something really small and you add to it and you add to it and add to it. And like us, we've been in business 19 years now. Eventually you get a lot.
Charlie?
You mentioned that automation, sorry Chris, is an evolution, right? And so as the three of you have been growing these companies, what are some of the pain points, or what are some of the stumbles that you had as you were going?
Yeah, I think when we first started automating things, it was much easier to get an offline job through the shop compared to an online job. What I would say is you have to be very honest with yourself as to where you're at when you first start out, and take little steps and stick with it. It's gonna be hard, there's gonna be frustrations, but you just have to keep going. And eventually you'll realize that when you do automate things, it's a lot easier.
Right on. How about you guys?
Yeah, it's a fail forward attitude. Like, you have to be able to make mistakes. You have to be able to take some risks. And you got to make sure you got the smartest people, right? And you're open to those ideas and suggestions. And we talked about this earlier, partnerships, right? There's a lot of people here with great ideas. They've done things that I never dreamed that could be possible, right? So sitting down and having a conversation, seeing how they got there, that's what makes all this happen.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. When you start out, the biggest problem is you don't know what you don't know, right? You have to figure out where to start, and that's the hardest thing. And like you just mentioned, I really think, coming to this show, you can find a mentor. There's hundreds of people here who've probably been through this journey and are at different stages of the journey, and talk to them, and even resources, from HP and elsewhere, like guys like Bob Ross, who know pretty much everything about everything. You could talk to them, talk to the vendors, and start really automation starts with a plan and a vision, and really an education. And eventually, then you think you know everything, and you only find out you don't know anything.
Absolutely.
Because somebody else does it. Wow, how'd you do that? And you do that.
Yeah, right on. And that, I think, that really embodies what DC Group is as a community, right?
Yeah.
We talk all the time about, you come here and you have these conversations and you have this mind-blowing thing, and those are real things you take back, right, to your companies, to your teams. And it's fascinating because it all starts here. So tell us a little bit, or for the group who isn't e-com or isn't in this kind of business just yet, tell us what a peak season is like.
You want me to go first?
Go for it.
Yeah, so peak season for us, we double in employee size. We produce probably 3 to 3.5 times what we do in a normal month, maybe even more. It's just pure chaos 24/7 until, whatever holiday hits, whether it's Q2 or Q4.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty much the same. We go from maybe thousands of orders a day to 10,000 orders a day, 24/7. Somebody has to, we have to figure out which supervisor is going to work the grave shift, Lots of, the biggest challenge for us for that time is just recruiting temporary people that are, good and that we can train and how to work that all out. But it's awesome.
Yeah, for me, it's a little different. Being employee owned, there's a fiduciary responsibility to share price and making sure that we get the most value out of our employees. So peak can be challenging. Really what we try and do is we try and just load balance, right? We run shifts 24 hours a day. It's all about the not doing time. I mean, honestly, we try and figure out how to get more jobs through the shop in value add process so that we can pay our employees more money to do that. And we think that automation helps take out the time in between, right? The non-value add time that they're performing.
Can you expound a little bit about that? Because you're a unique, you said you're an ESOP, right?
Yep.
So being an ESOP, a lot of people talk about how, or think that automation is going to reduce employees. Can you talk a little bit about just how you think about that as your organization?
Yeah, for me, I'd rather pay somebody a higher wage to do a skilled labor, right? So the making of the book, the cutting of the paper, the printing of the paper, those are all highly valued jobs, right? And I want people to work for us for a long time, retire from us, and have a great retirement through those share prices. Moving the product from the press to the cutter, or the cutter to someplace else, that is all non-value add, right? So if I can have a robot come on and move it, and I can have that employee process more jobs, it's a win-win. It's a win for the company, and it's a win for all the co-owners. It's not about replacing people, first and foremost. It's about making the job a better job for everyone.
And maybe I'd like all of you to expand on that, right? So with us, as we have implemented more automation, it's been awesome to see our team rally around that, right? Because they're thinking about how can we do this better? What about this part? What about this part? And they've really come to embrace that. Have you seen that as you've transitioned through this evolution as well?
Yes, and it's never about getting rid of people. Because generally, our business traditionally grows, 20+% year over year, and but what that means is you can't just throw bodies at problems over time, right? The problems become too large or too complicated where you need automation. And you want to keep a certain level of profitability, right? We're not in business just to lose money. So you have to find the right balance, I think, in terms of employee growth. I'd rather have fewer employees and pay our employees more, and build a long-term relationship with them. It's expensive to live. Inflation is what it is. And ultimately, the more automation we get, the more profitable we get, the more we can share that. And then the more successful we can be. So, yeah.
I think for us, a good example of this would be account management.
Okay.
So we're 6 times larger than we were when we were a commercial printer, and we have less account managers than we did then. Automation really, truly does allow you to leverage your staff to do more. And I mean, I think we want to be careful about talking about, having less people, but at the end of the day, labor is the one part of the business that is increasing and will never go down.
Great point.
And so you have to figure out a way to do more with the same or less amount of people. And that's truly what we're focusing on. So with robots, we are actually working on using robots in our binding area, having them feed, whether it's a 3-knife or a binder, and then we're working on automating packaging as well. Because at the end of the day, like you said, robots don't call in sick, they don't get emotional. And you've got to figure out how to do more with less.
Yeah, I mean, I'd speak into that and say what we do is custom manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
We don't make widgets, so to me, number of pieces per hour is less important as number of jobs per hour. So how do I get more jobs, less make ready, right? I get less make ready through JDF, right? Through automation, setup. That's the core focus. So same labor point, same hour, more jobs, more work, higher value, higher wages.
I'm gonna get into a weeds question just because we were on a call and you were like in a bunker. I mean, you were like surrounded by all these screens. And I'm like, hey, what's that? What's that? What's that? And we actually have a few slides here that we could share. Yeah, so that you shared with me. If we could pull those up. Yeah, so can you run through what we're seeing here?
Basically this is the efficiency outcomes due primarily to what we call color calibration. So before we were doing color calibration through a third-party software. So we'd run validation sheets, the press operator would walk away from their press, they'd run those through a standard, find out if the press was in a good condition or bad condition, go back, repair the press. Bad standards again, back out, back and forth. And so really what we were doing is we were pulling press operators away from the press. In addition to that, we were running a ton of sheets, right? Direct material costs were going through the roof. So we leveraged the PrintOS color beat tools in order to baseline the fleet of presses to make sure that mechanically the presses were in the proper state. We then allowed our color specialists to be able to manage the color and the profiling of the presses. This allowed us to use color beat in line to be able to reduce the number of sheets that we were printing in order to validate color. And actually, you can see the efficiencies in the presses. So this is our printing time going up. And that's our color beat scores once we started to do that. So that's a press line of 8 different presses.
So where did you make the change? I can't really tell. Somewhere in July. Can you expound on like a little bit about how that process went, like how you started and like what you thought was going to come out of it?
Well, it took a team, right? So first off, we had to understand the software. So that's where Bob Rouse and folks like that come in and having those conversations and jumping on some partner calls. Then we had to get the press manager on board, and then we had to train the press leads, and we had to kind of validate our thought process. And it really led to a great success story, right? And it's measurable, and that's another key component in this, right? If you can't measure it, then you don't know if it's real. So that chart tells me that what we're doing is moving us in the right direction, and when we look at the efficiency charts, we say yes, for sure. So the rubber's meeting the road.
Charlie, how do you approach, making these kind of decisions? Is it a team? You bring an entire team together? What is that like internally?
Yeah. So obviously we bring the management team together, and then we have a fairly large tech team. I think we have 8 full-time developers on staff, and we all just work together. But I think at the end of the day, we're trying to be as efficient as possible, but then also give our customers as much information in real time as possible as well. And so we also offer them an external portal where they can access and see anything at any time. They can make address changes, ship method changes. They can cancel orders on the portal or through the API. So we really just try and make it as easy as possible to do business with us.
You mentioned developers there, and I know you mentioned developers. I'm sure you have developers. Chris, you had talked about, I think you have 12?
Yeah.
12 developers? Is that one of the core competencies that you definitely need to have?
Yes. I mean, like I said, we started as a software company. So that, is our DNA effectively. And we utilize that as a strength. I mean, really at the end of the day, for us, it's about creating something that makes our customers successful. And so the more automation, the more accuracy we can put into the system, the happier our customers are, the more likely they're going to get more business, which is what we want. We want our customers to be successful, and then they reciprocate and they give us more business, and then we all win. And that's true with partners too, right? So that's, and the software development side really gives you the ability to be agile, right? Because if you're trying, one of the hardest things to do is integrate different technologies that work very differently. And sometimes it's easier to be able to build that glue if you have your own team that understands the business problems, right? The business problem, the problem with oftentimes between outsourced development and inside development is the outsourced development doesn't understand the business. And so they often will build something that'll be wrong. And so then you have to get really detailed with requirements. And when they're inside and they know what the customers are thinking, they know what the business needs, then usually you can operate much more efficiently from a software development standpoint. But I think you know, when you get to a certain size, it becomes mandatory.
Gotcha.
And it's not just one area, and you guys keyed in on this, right? It's marketing, it's workflow, it's customer service. Like there's automation opportunities everywhere. We brought 3 workflow folks with us today to go through the hackathon. We've got marketing people here. We've got people out of print services to find out vendors and partners in other regions of the U.S. who can help us. I mean, it's, you know, we brought people here that just aren't focused on, you know, manufacturing and numbers like that. It's about improvement throughout the whole process.
So what about for our members who are sitting here that might be a little overwhelmed by this, right? There's lots of things you can do. Everything needs to be automated. Where do you start? How do you pick a lane?
I would probably look at your core competencies, figure out what you're best at, and start there.
I'd say be humble, you know? None of us know everything, right? And so I happen to be colorblind, right? So I'm not going to be able to do those color profiles. So I need somebody to help me with that. And just like software development, automation, you need partners, you need friends. A lot of us here compete, but we're all frenemies, right? We're not really competing. And you know what? The more we can learn, understand, the more all of our businesses can grow. So I think you got to embrace being humble. You have to say, okay, what I think is so proprietary and unique is not. Everybody's already thought of the same thing. And I think once you let go of that and you open your mind to that, gosh, you know, we win together, then I think, you know, you start making that path. And like I said earlier, you start with one small step, and that's probably education, and then you just keep going. Eventually you get there.
Untapped genius of the people that work on your shop.
Love that.
Right?
Love that.
They know where the inefficiencies are. They have ideas. You got to listen to that. You got to bring that forward, and that then you got fuel for your dev team and your workflow folks and stuff like that. But it starts with the people on shop floor.
Love it.
You had mentioned, Chris, and you're rocking the hackathon shirt. Just the details and the coding. You were like, wow. You said there was an epiphany. You're like, this is way easier than I thought. I mean, the whole idea of getting started, I think when you get into development and coding, some people get a little intimidated. But then when you got into it, I mean, you obviously have a little bit of coding experience behind you. But you said, wow, this is way easier than I thought. Can you just kind of...
Yeah, so I assume most people here have Indigo presses or you have, you know, similar equipment. The truth is, a lot of the tools, the automation, you already have it. The difference is you don't have the glue, right? You don't have the glue to fill in all the different details and to move the workflows. And that is surprisingly easy if you know how to do it, right? So you don't need, you know, PhDs to do this kind of stuff. You know, like last year I went to the hackathon and, you know, we learned about JDF and JMS, and we had primarily worked on a hot folder system prior to that. I said, gosh, this JDF JMS stuff is easy. And I wrote the code myself, the first version, and I gave it to our software development team. They had us move from the hot folder system to a JDF system for our direct mail business, which is the biggest, in roughly 3 days. And that started with a hot folder system. Then we said, you know, gosh, now we're moving files around still. This is lame. Let's move to JMS. So then we moved to JMS, and then instantly, instead of having to scan a barcode after it comes off the press to say it's printed, now we automatically know that. We know how much that job costed. And it was surprisingly easy. I mean, we're talking days of code to do this. So from an investment standpoint, it is relatively simple. From a knowledge standpoint, it's hard because it took me 18 years to figure out I needed to move this way. That was an education thing. And coming here, I learned that last year. I was like, wow, you know, boom. And then we were able to do it. And now we're building a new product called Print Planet, which really manages all of our press schedules across the different plants. And also is going to optimize for price, efficiency, customer location, things like that. So I think, you know, you take one step, and then as you peer into it, you see more and more opportunity, and you just iterate, and it gets better and better.
Awesome.
Do we have time for a question from the audience, Chris? I think we do.
I think we have just barely enough
I
time.
think we do. Who has a question for our panel?
Is there any questions for our panelists today? Raise your hand. All right.
Bueller.
You guys got it easy.
You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.
This was awesome.
Yep.
Thank you so much, you guys. Round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Chris. We'll see you. You are
Farewell.